The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the ranch house for the first time in 3 months. My father was gone. The man who built this place with his bare hands, who taught me to ride before I could properly walk, who smelled of leather and tobacco and honest sweat. He was gone. I'd been working contracts in Wyoming when the call came. By the time I got back, the funeral was over. My brother Derek had handled everything. He'd always been the one who stayed close, the responsible son. I was the drifter, the one who couldn't settle. Now I stood on land I'd grown up on, feeling like a stranger. The barn needed paint. The fences sagged. Dad wouldn't have let things get this way. I noticed Derek's new truck parked by the house, a shiny black Silverado that must have cost 50 grand. Strange, considering Dad always said the ranch barely broke even. I knocked, though it felt wrong to knock on my own family's door. Derek answered, his face carefully neutral. We shook hands. His grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Glad you could make it," he said, though his eyes said otherwise. Inside, everything was the same, but different. Mom's quilts still hung on the walls, but new furniture filled the living room. Expensive furniture. "We need to talk about the will," Derek said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "Dad left everything to me. The ranch, the equipment, the accounts, everything." The words hit me like a fist. I'd expected us to split things, to figure it out together. "Everything?" I managed. Derek slid a document across the table. "Everything." I stared at the will, my father's signature stark at the bottom. The language was clear. The entire estate went to Derek James Harrison. Not a mention of me anywhere except in a single line. "To my son Marcus, I leave my pocket watch and my blessing." A pocket watch. 47 years of being his son, and I got a pocket watch. "This doesn't make sense," I said, my voice rough. Dad was practical," Derek interrupted. "You were never here. I'm the one who stayed, who worked this place, who sat with him when he was dying." The accusation stung because it was partly true. I had left. I'd chased work across 3 states while Derek remained. But completely cutting me out? That wasn't the man I knew. "When did he sign this?" I asked, studying the date. 2 weeks before he died. 2 weeks. Dad had been in bad shape by then, his mind foggy from the pain medication. I'd called every few days, but he could barely hold a conversation. "I want to talk to the attorney," I said. Derek's jaw tightened. "Martin Hendricks handled it. You can call him if you want, but it won't change anything. This is legal, Marcus. It's done." I looked around the kitchen, at the table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals, where Dad had taught us to play poker, where he'd lectured us about responsibility and honor. None of this felt right. "I'll call Hendricks tomorrow," I said, standing. Derek didn't try to stop me. As I walked to my truck, I noticed him watching from the window, his expression unreadable. Something was wrong here. I could feel it. That night, I stayed at the Sundown Motel on Route 37, a place where truckers and ranch hands crashed when they had nowhere else to go. I couldn't stomach the idea of asking Derek for a bed in what used to be my home. I lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning everything over in my mind. Dad had been a fair man, tough, but fair. He'd never played favorites, never suggested one son mattered more than the other. Even when I left for work opportunities, he'd understood. "A man's got to make his way," he'd said. So why would he cut me out completely? I thought about those last weeks. I'd been in Casper, finishing a pipeline job. The money had been good, and I'd planned to come home right after. Maybe stay a while, help with spring roundup. But the call had come first. Derek's voice, flat and final. "Dad's gone. Funeral's Friday." I'd driven 18 hours straight, but I was still too late. Derek had already buried him in the family plot next to Mom. Already cleared out his room. Already started acting like he owned everything. Because legally, he did. At dawn, I called Martin Hendricks's office. His secretary said he could see me at 10. I showered, put on my cleanest shirt, and drove to town. The attorney's office sat above the hardware store on Main Street, the same place where Hendricks had practiced for 40 years. He'd drawn up my parents' original wills, handled the ranching corporation, mediated a water rights dispute with the Johnsons. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. Hendricks was older than I remembered, his hair completely white now, his hands spotted with age. But his eyes were still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Marcus Harrison," he said, shaking my hand. "I'm sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you, sir." We sat in his cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and law books. I got straight to it. "I need to understand Dad's will. Derek says he inherited everything." Hendrix's expression shifted, something like discomfort crossing his face. "That's correct, according to the document that was filed." "According to the document that was filed," I repeated. "That's a strange way to put it." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk. Finally, he sighed. "Marcus, I'm going to tell you something that could get me in trouble, but your father was my friend for 30 years. I owe him the truth." My heart started pounding. "What truth?" "The will that was filed, the one giving everything to Derek. That's not the will I helped your father write." The office seemed to tilt. "What?" "6 months before he died, your father came to me. He wanted to update his will. He was clear-headed, completely competent. He wanted to split everything 50-50 between you and Derek. The ranch, the accounts, everything equal. I drew up the paperwork, he signed it, I filed it properly. Then how? 3 weeks before he died, a new will was filed. I didn't prepare it. I didn't know about it until after the funeral." Hendrix opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "This is the will I prepared." I read through the document Hendrix handed me, my father's familiar signature at the bottom. Everything split evenly. The land, the house, the equipment, the small savings account. Fair and equal, just like he'd always been. "Who prepared the other will?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Derek brought in an attorney from Silver City, guy named Robert Vance. I'd never heard of him, which was strange because I know every estate attorney in 3 counties. Hendrix leaned forward. "Marcus, your father was on heavy morphine those last weeks. His cognition was severely impaired. There's no way he could have understood what he was signing." "You're saying Derek forged this?" "I'm saying the circumstances are extremely suspicious. And I'm saying that if you want to challenge it, you have grounds. The timing, the cognitive impairment, the fact that it contradicts a more recent valid will, any judge would have questions." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and consuming. "My brother, my own blood. Why didn't you come forward before? I tried to reach you. Your phone was off. You were traveling. By the time I got through, the funeral was over and Derek had already started probate on the new will. Legally, I couldn't interfere without a family member challenging it. I'm challenging it now." Hendrix nodded. "I thought you might. I've already prepared a motion to contest. But Marcus, you need to understand, this is going to be ugly. Derek will fight, and it's going to tear what's left of your family apart." "He tore it apart when he stole my inheritance," I said. "I want my father's real wishes honored." I drove back to the ranch, Hendrix's folder on the passenger seat. The afternoon sun beat down on the prairie, everything gold and endless. This land had been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather had bought it in 1948 with money saved from working railroad jobs. My father had expanded it, suffered through droughts and market crashes, held on when neighbors sold out to corporate operations. He'd built something to pass down, and Derek had stolen it. I found him in the barn, working on a tractor engine. He looked up when I entered, wiping grease on a rag. "That was quick. Hendrix tell you what you wanted to hear?" "He told me the truth," I said, tossing the folder on his workbench. "That's Dad's real will. The one he actually wrote when he was in his right mind. The one that splits everything between us." Derek's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. You got some lawyer from Silver City to draw up a new will when Dad was too drugged up to know his own name. You took advantage of a dying man. Dad wanted me to have the ranch. I earned it by manipulating him, by stealing from your own brother." Derek's hands clenched into fists. "You left. You were never here. I was the one who sat up with him at night, who changed his sheets, who watched him waste away. You don't deserve this place. That wasn't your decision to make," I shot back. "And it damn sure wasn't Dad's decision when he was on morphine and barely conscious." We stared at each other across the barn, years of resentment suddenly visible. "I'm contesting the will," I said. "Hendrix is filing the paperwork." Derek's face hardened. "You'll lose." "We'll see." The legal process ground forward like a slow-motion train wreck. Hendrix filed the motion to contest. Derek's attorney, Vance, fought back with depositions and motions to dismiss. The ranch hung in limbo, neither of us able to sell or make major decisions. I moved into the old foreman's cabin on the property's edge, refusing to leave what was rightfully half mine. Derek pretended I didn't exist, passing me without a word when our paths crossed. The preliminary hearing was set for 8 weeks out. In the meantime, I started asking questions around town. Robert Vance, it turned out, had a reputation. He'd been sanctioned twice by the state bar for ethical violations. He specialized in estate work, particularly with elderly clients. Several families had complained about suspicious last-minute will changes, though nothing had stuck. I tracked down his office in Silver City, a shabby suite above a defunct restaurant. When I confronted him, Vance was smooth and unconcerned. "Your father signed that will of his own free will," he said. "I witnessed it personally. He was completely competent." "He was dying and drugged," I countered. "You took advantage." "Prove it." He smiled, and I wanted to hit him, but I walked away. Violence wouldn't help. The law would. I spent hours going through Dad's medical records, building the case. His morphine dosage had been increased significantly in those final weeks. His primary physician, Dr. Chen, documented confusion and disorientation. On the day Derek's will was signed, Dad had been given a triple dose for pain management. "There's no way he understood what he was signing," Dr. Chen told me privately. "I'm willing to testify to that if needed." The pieces were falling into place. The hearing arrived on a cold April morning. The county courthouse was a limestone building that had stood for 100 years, witnessing the rise and fall of ranching empires. I sat with Hendricks at one table. Derek sat with Vance at another. The judge, Margaret Thornton, was a gray-haired woman known for her no-nonsense approach and her intolerance for legal manipulation. Hendricks presented our case methodically, the timeline of Dad's wills, his medical records, the morphine dosage, Dr. Chen's testimony about cognitive impairment. Derek's attorney tried to argue that Dad had been lucid in moments, that he'd expressed clear wishes to leave everything to the son who'd stayed. But under cross-examination, Vance crumbled. "How long did you spend with Mr. Harrison before he signed the will?" Hendricks asked. "About 20 minutes. And who contacted you about preparing this will?" Vance hesitated. "His son, Derek. Derek contacted you, not the testator himself?" "That's correct. And you'd never met Mr. Harrison before that day?" "No." "Did you review his medical records before determining his competency?" "That wasn't necessary. Even though he was on hospice care, receiving heavy narcotics, and had been documented as confused by his primary physician?" "I made my own assessment." Judge Thornton leaned forward. "Counselor, did you perform any cognitive testing? Did you consult with his doctors? Did you do anything beyond ask a dying man to sign a document?" Vance had no good answer. The judge turned to Derek. "Mr. Harrison, did you understand your father's mental state when you arranged for this will to be signed?" Derek's face was stone. "I was trying to honor his wishes." "That's not what I asked." Silence. "This court finds the contested will to be invalid," Judge Thornton ruled. "Mr. Harrison's earlier will, prepared by Mr. Hendricks, will stand." The courtroom emptied slowly. Derek left without looking at me, Vance trailing behind him like a wounded dog. I stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. Justice had been served. Dad's real wishes would be honored, but the victory felt hollow. Outside, Hendricks shook my hand. "Your father would be proud. You fought for what was right." "I fought for what was mine," I said. "There's a difference." That night I went back to the ranch. Our ranch now, legally split between brothers who no longer spoke. I found Derek in the kitchen drinking whiskey from Dad's good bottle. "You got what you wanted," he said, not looking up. "I got what Dad wanted," I corrected, sitting across from him. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He laughed bitterly. "You swooped in, lawyered up, and took half of everything I've been working for years." "I didn't take anything. I just stopped you from stealing from me." "Stealing? You abandoned this place. You abandoned him." The accusation hung between us. I'd been wrestling with my own guilt since the day Dad died. "I left to work," I said quietly. "I sent money. I called. I visited when I could. That doesn't mean I loved him less. But you weren't here when it mattered. Neither were you, apparently. If you'd been the son you claimed to be, you wouldn't have needed to forge a will." Derek flinched. I didn't forge anything. Dad signed it. Dad was dying and confused, and you took advantage. You know it. I know it. The judge knew it. Get out, Derek said. This is my house too now. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. I left him there, drinking alone in the dark. The next morning, I stood on the porch watching the sunrise paint the prairie gold and pink. The land stretched out forever, rolling hills and grassland and sky. This was what Dad had loved, what he'd worked for. Not the house or the bank accounts, but this, the earth and the legacy. I thought about what came next. Derek and I would have to negotiate a path forward. Maybe we'd split the property formally, each take a parcel and work it separately. Maybe we'd try to run it together, though I couldn't imagine how that would work with this much anger between us. Or maybe I'd buy him out, or he'd buy me out, and one of us would walk away. But standing there, breathing in the cool morning air, I realized something. I'd been so focused on justice, on claiming what was mine, that I'd lost sight of why Dad built this place. He'd wanted to leave something behind, not for himself, but for us, for his sons. The will he'd written, the real one, split things evenly because he loved us equally. He'd wanted us to share this, to build on it together. Derek had betrayed that, but in my own way, so had I. I'd left, chased work elsewhere, let Derek carry the weight alone. I wasn't innocent in this family's fracture. The door opened behind me. Derek stepped out, looking exhausted. We stood side by side in silence. I'm sorry, I said finally, for not being here more, for letting you handle everything alone. Derek didn't respond right away. Then quietly, I'm sorry too, for what I did. It was wrong. Forgiveness wouldn't come easy. Trust would take years to rebuild, if it ever did. But standing there on land 3 generations of Harrisons had worked. Maybe we could find a way forward. Over the following weeks, Derek and I began the difficult work of rebuilding. Not just the ranch, though the fences needed mending and the barn needed paint, but our relationship. We split the daily work, morning and evening chores, maintaining the cattle and equipment. Our conversations were brief, professional, careful. Neither of us quite knew how to bridge the gap that had opened, but we tried. I learned things I'd never known. Derek had been carrying debt I didn't know about, medical bills from Dad's final year that insurance hadn't covered. That new truck? Financed to the limit because he'd needed reliable transportation to get Dad to treatments in Denver. The expensive furniture? Bought to make Dad's last months more comfortable, to give him a place to rest that wasn't a hospital bed. You could have told me, I said one evening, reviewing the ranch accounts together. You were in Wyoming. What were you going to do? I would have come home. I would have helped. Would you? The question hung there, unanswerable. Would I have? I wanted to believe I would, but Derek had learned not to count on me. That was my failure to own. We sold off some cattle to clear the immediate debts. We applied for an agricultural development grant to update the irrigation system. We hired a part-time hand, a young guy from town who needed work. Slowly, the ranch began to stabilize. One afternoon, while repairing a water trough, Derek said, I panicked. When Dad was dying, when I saw those medical bills, when I realized I might lose this place, I panicked. Vance said he could help, and I didn't ask enough questions. You committed fraud? I said bluntly. I know. We worked in silence. Finally, I said, but I understand why. 3 months after the court ruling, Hendricks called with news. Robert Vance had been disbarred. The state bar investigation had uncovered a pattern of manipulating dying clients. 4 other families had come forward with similar stories. Vance would face criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. Justice has a way of catching up, Hendricks said. I thought about that, about justice and mercy and the complicated math of family. Derek had done something terrible, driven by desperation and pride, but he was still my brother. Dad would have wanted us to find a way through this. That evening, I found Derek in the barn. Vance got disbarred, I said. I heard. The prosecutor asked if I want to file charges against you for your part in it. Derek's face went pale. Are you? I'd thought about it. What Derek did was criminal. Exploiting a dying man's confusion, forging documents, stealing an inheritance. He could face serious charges, but sending my brother to prison wouldn't bring Dad back. It wouldn't heal the ranch or repair our family. No, I said, on one condition. What? We work together. Really work together. No more secrets, no more competing. We run this place as partners, the way Dad wanted. Derek was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Deal. We shook hands, and it felt like the first honest gesture we'd shared in years. The ranch had been worth fighting for, but family, broken, complicated, imperfect family, that was worth fighting for too. Dad had known that. It was why he'd split everything evenly, even knowing our flaws. He'd believed in us, in me, despite my absence, in Derek, despite his pride. Maybe he'd believed we could find our way back to each other. A year later, the ranch was thriving in ways it hadn't in a decade. We'd diversified, added a small organic vegetable operation, started hosting hunting groups in the fall, even rented out the old foreman's cabin as a vacation property for city people wanting to experience ranch life. Derek handled the day-to-day operations and the cattle. I managed the new ventures and the books. We played to our strengths and stayed out of each other's way when we needed space. We'd never be what we were as kids, wrestling in the barn and sharing secrets. Too much had happened, but we'd found something else. A working partnership built on honesty and shared purpose. I stood in the cemetery on the anniversary of Dad's death, looking at his headstone. Henry James Harrison, loving father, honest man. The prairie wind whispered through the grass. We got there, Dad, I said quietly. Took us a while, but we got there. Behind me, I heard boots on gravel. Derek appeared carrying wildflowers, prairie roses, Dad's favorite. He placed them on the grave without a word. We stood together in silence, two brothers who'd almost lost everything fighting over an inheritance, who'd learned the hard way that some things can't be split with legal documents or court rulings. Family is complicated. Love is imperfect. Forgiveness is a choice you make every day. Dad had known that. He'd built this ranch not just as a business, but as a legacy of values, integrity, perseverance, and the belief that family, at its core, is worth fighting for. Not fighting against each other, but fighting for each other. Same time next year? Derek asked. Same time next year, I agreed. We walked back to our trucks, heading home to the ranch. Our ranch. Together.